Welcome to Film Courage. This is episode 155. I'm Karen Warden.
And I'm David Brandon. You can find our archives on iTunes, filmcourage.com, latalkradio.com, and Movie Garage.
Today's guests are documentarians Audrey Yule and Aaron Aites, founders of 99%, the Occupy Wall Street collaborative film.
99% The Occupy Wall Street Collaborative Film is a documentary film project founded by multiple independent filmmakers working in conjunction across the country. They've come together and pledged their time, skills, and gear to document the events which recently took place in New York City and across America with the Occupy Wall Street movement. They invite you to do it with them as the Occupy Wall Street movement continues.
The protest began in September of 2011 in Lower Manhattan and spread nationwide. As momentum furthered, many involved complained that media is failing in their coverage. The filmmakers are calling for others to join them in documenting the Wall Street movement.
Currently, Audrey and Aaron are raising money for the project via Indiegogo. You can check out the campaign by visiting indiegogo.com/99film.
In addition to 99%, Audrey and Aaron are the award-winning directors, producers of the internationally theatrically distributed feature Until the Light Takes Us, a doc about Norwegian black metal, a violent music subculture, and are currently working on a narrative thriller, Dark Places. Please welcome to Film Courage via telephone, filmmakers Audrey Yule and Aaron Aites. Welcome both. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for being here. You can follow Audrey and Aaron on Twitter at Audrey Yule and at Aaron Aites, and that's AARONAITES. And you can also follow their film, 99_film, all on Twitter.
Yeah. So let's find out, how did the Occupy Wall Street movement begin? For either one of you.
Let's just that's starting off with a huge question.
Yeah.
We're just editing the explanation for that in the other room as we speak.
That's
well, perfect.
Okay. See, like minds. Okay.
Well, as you mean the actual
the actual movement for those that you know
that are sort of in the dark about it, that just maybe seen it on the news, but they don't really know what it's about. And how did it begin? And then we'll go into where is it right now, and then where is it going?
Okay. Well, so the first thing that probably we should say is that we are not part of the Occupy movement.
Okay.
We're independently covering it without being directly affiliated.
Sure.
And so we have about 100 people working on the film right now all over the country. And some of them, many of them, do identify as part of the movement. But a lot of people also do not. They're very interested in just covering it from a more objective space. So when I talk about the movement itself, I always just have to say, and this is funny actually because I'm actually now repeating what people in the movement actually say, but I can only speak from my own perspective.
Okay.
And that also means that they don't represent the perspective of the film, because maybe I should back up just a tiny bit, because the film was actually sort of intended to mirror the processes of the movement. It was set up as a parallel experiment. So while we do have experienced filmmakers leading it, there's all of these people all over the country working on and making it. So the idea behind it is that it would have many perspectives, and that the many perspectives together would form the sort of most objective and complete portrait of the movement itself. So I just have to say that when I say anything, I'm only talking for me, Audrey, and not necessarily for the entirety of the film or the film's perspective.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. That's understood.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So how did the movement start? Well, America was in a weird place. I mean, we're looking at a situation where since the 2008 economic meltdown, here in America and around the world, there were just so many things that weren't working for so many people. And this Occupy movement that came up in America is the sort of American expression of a very global movement and a global sentiment. You look at places like the Middle East and you have the Arab Spring, and you look at Greece where there are austerity riots, you look at Spain and South America and all these places that are having movements of their own. and there's a degree of sympathetic movements where they're Occupy affiliated. But regardless of that, it's the same kind of thing happening around the world where people are looking at a basic inequality and just reaching a point where they don't want things to continue business as usual. And I think that it's just one of those zeitgeist moments in history where a lot of people are feeling the same pressures and come together to do something about it, to create really fundamental change.
Sure. And
or you could look at it from the fact that basically a lot of people had these sympathetic feelings, and then Adbusters put out a call for an occupation, and a lot of people from various different protest groups and different walks of life decided, okay, let's make this happen, and they did.
And who was the sort of spearhead of the entire movement, or do we not know?
Well, there's a network of activist organizations who, in the U.S., a lot of them were centered in New York, and they were getting together and actually having planning meetings around this. And they were also working with people around the world, people in Spain, people in the Middle East, people from UK Uncut and various groups who were together working on building a sort of horizontal democratic process. And they had this idea that they wanted to do a general assembly like the ones they'd seen in Spain and in the Middle East. And so that's kind of what the whole idea is centered around. When Adbusters made their call to occupy Wall Street, that acted like as a lightning rod. And that was something that people could just sort of focus on and focus their energies toward. And so that Adbusters had an incredibly large role in this whole thing actually taking off.
Okay.
But initially, when people started meeting to plan what was going to happen September 17th after the call, it was a variety of different groups, a variety of different people who just came together, started meeting, started planning.
Okay. And if memory serves me right, I believe that the LA Occupy movement was sort of shut down in November, I believe, of 2011. Are there others that are still in full force, or have they sort of been all shut down throughout the country?
There are a couple that still exist, but I think that, so a lot of people in the movement talk about phase 2. And so after the evictions in a lot of the major cities, the organizers started to regroup and kind of get together around planning sessions and idea sessions and going back to the sort of planning that had been happening before the major encampments. And, there'd been a lot of focus around May 1st and the G8 and NATO summits in Chicago. And so now we're just kind of looking and waiting to see what happens with that after the president announced that they were moving the G8 to Camp David instead of having it in the more public space of Chicago. So they had this other focus for where, they were going to come out again in force in a very visible way. So now it's just at least from my perspective, a kind of wait and see how they adjust.
Got it. Okay.
Aaron, I mean, how powerful is this movement? Is this the most powerful thing of its kind that you've experienced in your lifetime?
That I've experienced myself, like literally being there, yeah, absolutely. The first time that Audrey and I went was after the first Brooklyn Bridge March, where over 700 people were arrested very close to our apartments. And we were watching it on live stream, and the guy's camera just sort of blacked out, and because he ran out of batteries, and no one else was covering it. We tried to find someone else covering it, so we just decided to, we have cameras, we have lights for filmmakers. Let's just go down and see what's happening. And it was just a surprisingly powerful kind of experience. So yeah, definitely from my perspective, in my lifetime, it is. I mean, I can't speak for other major protest movements that have gone before, but for me, it's definitely a unique experience.
Sure. And why the Occupy movement? What is it that either fascinates you or fuels you? I know you said that you're not directly involved, and I think that was the same with your other film on the Norwegian black metal, that you were just you weren't into burning churches or anything, right?
Burning down churches, for the record.
right. And it's funny too, because in reading some of the comments, people, it seemed like they assumed that you were supporters of this in some ways, maybe on YouTube or whatever, but you weren't. You were just fascinated by such a strange subculture. So what is it about the Occupy subculture, if you want to call it that?
Well, I mean, there's so much there. I personally find it very difficult to either wholeheartedly support or be against anything.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And that was true of Until the Light and the black metal scene that we were profiling, where there was a lot that I loved and respected about it, and then a lot that I disagreed with. And I'd say the same is true of the Occupy movement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that obviously they're tapping into a lot of frustration and a lot of issues that really need to be addressed and dealt with. And I think that a lot of the core issues that the Occupy movement does deal with are issues that are very important to me, and are things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and being upset about, or et cetera. And so when the movement actually started, I think that a lot of people around the country just had a sense of, oh, they're talking to all of these things that I've been dealing with. And I think that just has a great appeal for people to feel that not only could they be heard, but that other people are actually saying the same things that they're thinking, that have sort of been swept under the carpet. I mean, when you have people like Mitt Romney saying that, class warfare is the sort of thing that should be talked about in back rooms, but not directly addressed, I think that just pisses people off, and rightly so.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of people had just felt silenced for a long time, and the movement was an avenue of expression and of being heard. And talking about things that they were very correct in that these things needed to be addressed as a culture and maybe as a global culture, because business as usual just has broken down and the systems don't work for the majority of people anymore.
Okay.
I guess to help give this conversation some perspective, Audrey and Aaron, where were both of you, like, as Occupy Wall Street was being initiated and being, and as people started attending, where were both of you in your lives? Because all of a sudden, here you are, you're full steam ahead on this film project. But where were you heading into this movement?
Well, we were working on Dark Places, basically with, someone in LA, and basically like working on the fourth draft of that, and basically moving forward towards that. And we decided to put it on hold in order to do this, and fortunately the people who we're working with were amenable to that as well.
So Dark Places is a thriller. We had come off of sort of finishing up a lot of the distribution of Until the Light Takes Us, and we're prepping this thriller to go, and then Occupy started. And I originally didn't have any intention to do anything on it. I had absolutely no intention of suddenly making a documentary film, let alone one that had like 100 people working on it. It was just one of those moments that was like, when Aaron was talking about the arrest happening on the Brooklyn Bridge. I was at home. I do outreach for indie films and bands and things like that, and I was working on a film that was premiering in London. I was doing PR for that, and I had the live stream of the bridge on, and just the fact that it wasn't on the news that there were 700 people being arrested on a bridge in New York City, it just made me angry. And I just wasn't prepared to let that situation exist in the world. So that was what galvanized us, finally, to go and, check out what was happening. And because we're filmmakers, we check things out with camera.
Sure.
And so, pretty much instantaneously, the idea was that, okay, so we're going to do a project around this. We're going to document this. And we just felt that it should be documented in a collaborative fashion that mirrored the movement itself. We thought that was both the most interesting treatment and also the one that I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but as someone who's not going to join a movement, it was almost a way of our version of experiencing the movement in this, I really do call it a parallel experiment, to sort of see how the systems would work in a kind of real-world example or model. And we found some very interesting things by actually applying their model to the filmmaking model.
I'm always amazed when life just throws us these curveballs. We think we have everything planned out, it's mapped out, we're heading in a certain direction, and then next thing you know, you're full steam ahead into something like this. I wanted to ask, is there any significance to the fact that Occupy Wall Street began 10 years and 1 week after 9/11?
I never really thought about it that way.
I don't know. I think it had more to do with the sort of the international scene and the fact that there were these other movements who had made calls for things like the Day of Rage, and that there were other kind of protest movements and actual protest days going on. There was actually, before Occupy Wall Street, there was another call to Occupy for August, and nobody showed up. So I'm not sure that that's really tied in.
Would you say that most of the people who attend the Occupy protests are recently laid off, or the working poor, or do they cross all class levels?
They really do cross all class levels. There are plenty of people that we met there that were not, in any way, it seems, adversely. We met some cinematographers there who we ended up working with as well. It's really impossible to just generalize about the people that were there. They seem to come from all, walks of life, all different levels of, the social strata.
Sure.
But that's one of the things that we actually address in the film. Is the film is organized around threads. So various directors are taking on various aspects of the occupation or of the cultural environment for the film. And so Nina Kristig is a director who is directing the media and Occupy Thread. And so that's something she looks at, the way in which the media has covered the movement and some of the sort of, really silly things that have been put out there about, and also it's the conservative talking point as well. Obviously, that it's like hippies and junkies, I think.
Right, and I found it interesting to listen to a lot of the, interviews as far as the people that were there, and there was a very sort of us versus them mentality that if just the 1% would share some of their wealth, then we wouldn't be in this situation. And I realize that's not sort of your job as filmmakers to solve this problem or point blame, but from what you've seen, okay, well that's where I'm going with this. I'm curious, what are your opinions on this? Because I'm wondering if it's more of a collective problem, people that bought homes at the height of the market and different things that happen, or is it sort of that us versus them mentality that the wealthy have gained control and we're feeling the effects of it?
So one of the things of making the films that we've had to kind of deal with is that there's so much complexity to these issues. And that's something that the movement has dealt with by sort of refusing to name specific demands, to refusing to distill it down to there's one problem, that if we fix this one problem, everything else would fall into place. Well, the movement is bringing light to a kind of systemic failure across the board of corruption on Wall Street and in government, where big money is buying big favors, and essentially we've lost a representative government, and the ways in which that filters down to sort of every level of society. It's kind of a huge problem.
I think the simple way to describe it is I think the problem is institutional. It's impossible to just really separate one thing. The problem is systemic. It's throughout the entire system. And I think their goal, more than to fix it, was simply to get people talking about it, to open up a dialogue of talking about the problem as it exists, as opposed to like talking about, oh, we have like a major national debt. They want to like actually get people talking about the problem as it is, and then try to go from there, and hopefully within the dialogue some things can be figured out. And I think that the dialogue that they started has had an effect nationally, a major one. If you just listen to the way politicians talk right now, there are things that they're saying that they never would have said without this movement, and they really have sort of like shifted the focus of how people are looking at the problems our financial systems in our government are facing or need to face if they're not actually facing them.
Mm-hmm. And if this, I know they say we're out of a recession, but if this sort of lull that we have where still jobs are just so scarce and money's so tight continues for many more years, do you think people would then turn very, very violent, as in some other countries? You know, this seemed to be more peaceful, but do you think we'll reach a breaking point?
People within the movement, do you mean, or the general
The general public, yeah. Do you think that things could get more out of hand? It seems like this was a little more controlled, although I'm sure law enforcement would not think that. But do you think we could ever reach a point, if years continue down the line, that we're still in this situation? And you know, we're told continuously, oh, it'll be, 18 more months, and then we'll see sort of a spike in this, and it seems to just be sort of dragging out. And do you think that people will tire of this and become angry? They're already angry, but violent.
I think people are very angry. Mm-hmm. I think that people are trying to channel their anger now. And I think that the Occupy movement has been very clear about a stated principle of nonviolence. And while there are some differences of opinion between specific different groups, for instance, we see a lot more violence and have seen a lot more in Oakland. But there are a lot of reasons for that. Mm-hmm. It's very complicated, but in Oakland you have people who have this history of resistance and of protest and of progressive action. You also have, a police force that's used to dealing with a high crime area, and you have groups of black bloc anarchists who have their own agenda. So you have this interesting mix of people in Oakland, and each occupation does have its own sort of makeup like that. But the movement as a whole has a commitment to nonviolence, because a lot of it's a PR battle. A lot of what I've seen them talk about is the idea that the public will turn against them if they start waging a violent campaign. And however, that if they remain nonviolent, the police will still respond in a violent fashion, and we've certainly seen that across the country. And that will point out some of the problems and some of the desire of those in power to maintain control at all costs. And so they're very much trying to stick to this nonviolent tactic as a way of pointing out a problem that's within the system. As far as the general public, I don't know. I think that, I don't know, that's really hard to say. I guess my gut says that we probably are already seeing a bit more violence, but it's not organized. I think we probably are seeing, crimes of desperation. I don't know. I don't have any figures on this, so I can't really speak to it. Okay. But, yeah. I mean, we're not, we're filmmakers, so,
right.
I sort of can focus on the thing I'm making a film about and learn a lot about that.
Right now I'm focusing on the problems with transcoding footage.
The codec on your Final Cut Pro.
And all different kinds of cameras in the ProRes LT. So.
I mean, too much speculation is going to have me looking really dumb. So.
Okay. But that's perfect, because we're going to start talking more about the filmmaking. And Audrey, you said really, seeing these 700 people arrested really galvanized you, and you just felt you had to do something about it. So, here you are, you have the idea to make this film. How long did you sort of waver on the decision before you filed through it? I mean, was this something you wavered on, or is this something like, what?
Well, I'm a very impetuous person at times. I leap blindly into projects because it's the only way that I would ever do it. If I actually thought about the ramifications of my actions, of the amount of work that I was going to have to do, and the drastic, dire consequences it would have in my life, I would not make films. So I think that I just put on the blinders and leap with these things, and that's exactly what I did here. I was pissed off at the way the media was handling it, and so I started a collaborative film. I mean, it was that simple.
I recognized the ramifications as soon as he came up with the idea, I have to say. But
Aaron, were you the voice of reason? Were you like, hold on a second here?
Tried to be.
No, I thought it was a good idea, and I thought that I wasn't sure that there'd ever actually been a film made like this with multiple directors, multiple perspectives. I mean, I know there have been films with multiple directors where it's sort of like shorts strung together. But to actually weave like a cohesive narrative from a bunch of different voices, I thought that would be a real challenge. I mean, I love making Until the Light Takes Us, and I love that film, but I thought if we were going to do another doc, like doing something interesting with the form would be something that really appealed to me. So I did recognize it was going to be really hard, but I thought it was an interesting kind of collaborative experiment, and that's really sort of how I think of it, as an experimental film.
Mm-hmm. So once you were all in, and Audrey, you'd convinced Aaron to be a part of it, what was the first step? What would you do? And you said you saw the sort of the protest going on the live stream, and you were angry because it wasn't covered.
Yeah. Sorry. So I saw the live stream. It cut out. I flipped on the news. It wasn't on the news. So Aaron and I went down to Zuccotti Park. We filmed that night, and then the next day we started sort of, calling people and sending out emails and just getting in touch with filmmaker friends and saying, hey, we're going to do this collaborative project on Occupy. Do you want to, make a film with us? And so then they reached out to their friends, their filmmaker friends, and we had about 35 filmmakers at that point involved. And then we decided that if we were really going to mirror the movement and do it in like a true parallel experiment, then we needed to open it up to anybody who wanted to be involved. And that's where it really got fun.
Interesting.
So we did some cuts to sort of get out the word. Mm-hmm. We had some stuff in Filmmaker Magazine, the New York Times, and so through that, people started to get in touch with us, and people contacted us via our Twitter page. So one of the first things that I did when I had the idea to start the film was, since I do outreach, like instantly, overnight, we had a website up, and we had a Twitter and a Facebook. So there were these, the infrastructure was there for people to reach us, and so they started to. And within about a month, we had around 60 people, I think, and now we're around 100.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And so, those initial 35 filmmakers, were they all based in New York City, or were they already at the beginning, were they spread out all over the country?
Well, they were mostly in New York and LA right at first.
Yeah. Obviously. Yeah. So that was, we did kind of put out the word that we were interested in people in other places also, working with us. So.
You say you have, almost 100 filmmakers involved with the project. How do you go about selecting the filmmakers? Were there some that you decided not to use? Were some a little too militant for you? Or just, it's a sort of a marriage. You have to be able to cooperate. So what was your screening process?
Well, it was an interesting thing that happened. For the most part, people self-selected themselves out. Oh. There were a couple people who didn't sort of work very well with the group, and there were people who were interested in propaganda, and only interested in propaganda, by which I mean they were only interested in a favorable depiction of the movement.
Interesting.
And so that was just something that I set as a guideline in advance, that we are not doing propaganda.
Okay.
And we will not sort of allow that sort of perspective to take control of the project. It's not worth doing a film to me if it's propaganda. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, doing something that sheds light and brings context. And you need to be honest for that to actually happen. Mm-hmm. And, the movement certainly has warts. And this is reality. It's real life, of course. So, people who didn't like that left. And at the same time, people who were very, very critical also tended to leave, because most people in the film, you know, to some degree relate to the movement, whether they're part of it or not. You know, I don't think too many of us have health insurance, for instance. And so there's like a baseline of where, if you're young in America and working in creative pursuits, there's a certain second-class citizenship that goes along with that.
Oh, sure.
Where, you know, we don't have access to basic services.
Right. I'm wondering how... Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, sorry, go ahead.
These people, seems like they sort of weeded themselves out. Did you have to cut ties? And if so, how do you do that? Can't even say the word, but it's almost like ending a bad relationship. So how do you do that? How do you cut ties and make sure that no one's too disgruntled, if that's possible?
I don't actually care about people being disgruntled.
Okay, that's fair.
I really don't, and I'm perfectly fine with telling people where to take it if they're jerky or whatever.
Right.
Making films is really, really, really hard, as anybody who actually makes them knows. And I don't have time for a lot of bullshit, and I don't have patience for a lot of bullshit.
Okay.
So for me, it's kind of like, you're either here to work, and this is going to be work, or if you're not able to, then, you know, go home.
Right.
You know?
You may have gathered from Audrey's last comments that one way our film differs from the movement, it is our film is not a leaderless movement.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. No, and there has to be.
Well, that was actually that was part of the process, the experimental process of, you know, figuring out. So we were sort of taking the Occupy process and trying to apply it to a real-life model of where you could have all of these people, you know, working together on something. But when we turned it into this thing of where we have an actual goal, a specific goal, which is to make a feature film that can actually be seen by a wide audience, and that will, you know, have value to the larger society and et cetera, but also be of a certain professional quality. We quickly found that you simply do not make films by committee. There can be collaborative aspects to it, but it must have leaders.
Sure.
So specifics there, for instance.
Talk about Nina. Like they really did sort of self-select in a way. I mean, some people wanted to, you know, just go film when they wanted to film, and then they were happy with that. Other people wanted to pledge their skills. Other people, like Nina Christic, who's doing the media thread that Audrey just talked about, just came and said, I want to do something more. Here's my idea. And we're like, great. And we hooked her up with other different people who would like written in, and you know, there's basically, it really did sort of come together in a kind of organic way with people. Once we basically understood what different people were willing to pledge and what they wanted to do, it was just a matter of organizing. Not to minimize how much organizing it took, but.
Right.
But and for people who didn't want to make a huge commitment, there was space for that also. You know, people were absolutely able to just film and send things in, and then, you know, we would either use it or not. But people who wanted to work more directly and collaboratively on making the film, you know, we all talked about, well, what should this film be? And so the whole group had this discussion early on about what should the film be about, and so we made an outline about what topics the film should cover, and then people stepped forward to direct the threads around those, or other people said, you know, I filmed this rally and I'm going to send it in, and that's my contribution, and that's totally fine as well.
Sure.
So it is a mix and it is a range. But if people did step forward and take responsibility, then we very much expected that to be respected, because this is a lot of work. And so that was sort of an issue that came up with having non-professionals work on the film, is I think a lot of people have this idea that filmmaking is something you can do sort of as in a not very serious way. Yeah. And so that was a problem at times, where people would take responsibility and step forward and want it, and then not be able to fulfill that.
Sure.
And that's the sort of thing that we've just had to deal with, that most films don't have to.
Right, right. Well, this question comes in from Marty Lang, and it ties into what you had said earlier about people wanting to be part of it for their own agenda and sort of spreading propaganda. And he says, my question to Audrey and Aaron would be, has it been a challenge maintaining objectivity throughout the making of the project? If I was making something like this, I would have a really hard time keeping my own wildly liberal ideas out of things. Looking forward to your insights. So how are you?
Hi, Marty.
Yeah.
And
Marty.
so that's sort of one of the interesting things about this. I kind of don't have to, in that with all these other voices, my voice can be heard without taking over the project or taking over the perspective. I happen to be one of the more cynical people on the film.
Okay.
And so the good thing is that the film will not be a cynical hatchet piece. Not that it would be, but it couldn't be. Even if I wanted to do that, I couldn't do it with all these other people's voices in it. So that was kind of the idea going in, is that maybe the closest thing to a subjective portrait, to an objective portrait would be a multitude of subjectivities. So I don't have to not be the cynical, dark, bitter soul that I am. I can still be that and also make a multifaceted film about this.
And to be honest, even if we weren't making it this way, it's really the kind of film that I'd want to see about this. I mean, I think the movement itself is so big and so widespread and covers so many different groups of people and things that just having sort of one person's analysis on it is kind of just insufficient.
I'm just imagining this. I mean, 100 filmmakers. I mean, how do you begin to divide up the work? You have 100 people committed to shooting footage. I mean, how do you divide up the work?
They're not all necessarily shooters. I mean, sometimes, like, say someone is a shooter, and they're like, well, I want to help on this, but I'm not really going to be, doing any investigation on my own. So give me a call if you need someone to go help shoot. There's really a lot of different levels of commitment and a lot of different skills that different people have, So it's more than just people strictly shooting. I mean, our post-production supervisor just showed up here right now with a transcode for us. I mean, like, there's people that are helping in a variety of ways. I mean, making films takes a ton of skills, and many more than just being able to go somewhere and point a camera.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of our people, like we've got Ginger Liu in LA who does PR and outreach. She's working. We have a few PR and outreach people, and we have my a friend and filmmaker who I really respect, David Duvernay. She sent us a hard drive, and she's hoping to have some time to work on this. I should mention she just won the Best Director Award at Sundance.
Oh, very cool.
Very talented woman. Nice. And, we have Stephen Dodson and Carrie Collins, are running our Twitter, and there's a girl in Montreal who's running our Facebook. We've got some great web designers, Matt Waldman and Jeremy King. One's in Tokyo, one's in Brooklyn. So we have like a whole team, of editors.
We have a whole team of editors.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of people working on the film in all kinds of capacities. Aaron Yanis, our supervising editor, is just phenomenal. And then our lead editor, Tyler Walk, is working through he's in the next room working. So, I mean, I could keep going, though. It's like there's so many of us all doing different things.
And when you get so many people that are essentially, helping you to crowdsource this material, is there any compensation expected on the back end, or is everyone just literally volunteering their efforts and their time, to get this film made?
Well, I don't really think of it as crowdsourcing. I really do think of it as collaborating, where people can take as big or as small a role as they want to.
I mean, it's really more targeted than that. Expect about, like say we have someone in New York who wants an interview for their thread, and the subject is found in California. So the way it works is Audrey will get in touch with the subject, and we'll find filmmakers in California, filmmaker in New York will read their questions and say what they want. I mean, it's not really crowdsourcing. It really is a collaboration that sort of stretches across the nation, and it's targeted filming. It's not really so much looking for stuff. It's connecting people and having people collaborate and meet. And that's one of the greatest things about the project is all the people that we've met doing it that are awesome. So,
were there any scary sort of close calls during the filming, either from yourselves or someone else, or maybe law enforcement got mad if someone was filming them?
Audrey almost got arrested.
Okay.
Law enforcement has been very mad many times that we've been filming.
Okay.
Well, one of our filmmakers, Gretchen, she was actually arrested, and so she's having to deal with that process. It looks like they're going to throw it out. But
Abby's been pepper sprayed.
Yeah, Abby Martin, our director in Oakland, she's been pepper sprayed multiple times. I've been pepper sprayed with Jen Cox, one of our cinematographers in New York. I was also almost arrested while filming an arrest. There's been this whole thing of where the police have very actively tried to bar press and people with cameras from filming, most of what they do. So when there was a point after the eviction in New York, like right after, where I was trying to film them arresting this girl, and the cops started getting shovey with me, and I do what you're not supposed to do, which is talk back to cops. And so I did. I told him I had a right to film, and he really didn't like that at all. So he starts grabbing my camera, and all the cops are shoving. And I'd just been talking to one of the National Lawyer Guild guys for a while, and so he was right there, and Aaron was behind me. So I had people yelling on my behalf, and then the cops saying, I had people saying, she's pressed, and then the cops yelling, where's your press pass? And, it was just kind of this crazy scene, and then I felt someone grabbing my camera, which I had above my head. I was filming the whole time, and I was like, oh, fuck, oh, shoot, I'm so sorry. I can't, I'm so sorry. I just said that.
Oh, no, you've had a lot of things.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's okay, yeah.
So I felt someone grabbing the camera, and I was like, oh, no, someone's trying to get it. And so I, held on for dear life. It was like, you might get me, but you're not getting my camera.
Right.
And then I kind of realized that it was Aaron behind me trying to grab me and pull me back out of the fray.
Ah.
And so I kind of got out of that one. But other filmmakers have been thrown by the police, and their cameras have been broken.
Or shot.
And shot.
Really?
We had Scott Campbell in Oakland was actually shot by a police officer. He was not doing anything at all. He was filming, and he was shot.
And what happened to him?
With he was wounded.
It was a rubber bullet.
It was a rubber bullet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. But this has really been one of those. We're putting ourselves out there. A lot of people are putting themselves out there to cover this. So.
Now you have a current Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. Where do things stand with the film? And tell us more about the campaign.
Well, we just started this Indiegogo campaign, but it's kind of a rough time because we're scrambling to get an edit together, a rough cut to both to bring to funders to try and get some real funding in here, and doing all the sort of film things that have to happen. And at the same time, we just keep running out of hard drives. It's like, I think 4 broke in the last week.
Oh,
geez.
We're sending them around the country, picking up footage, and that's not really supposed to, hard drive's not really built for that, but so we're dealing with that. And then there's also just constant storage needs. Having so many editors, it means we need to have all these hard drives, and there's just so much material. So, it's a constant kind of thing for us. And then just making films costs money. So, yeah, we have an Indiegogo campaign up. We've done 2 successful Kickstarter campaigns. And again, that was, the most recent one, we raised about $20,000. And so one of our contributors, Billy, is a curator. So he curated all of this art for us, and all these amazing artists donated artwork to it. And so we had a sort of a campaign built around that. And so for the one right now, we're kind of trying to do it at the same time as we're trying to do all these other things. So we've just started it, and we're really hoping that, I personally don't have time this time to do outreach, really, so we're hoping that we're kind of out there to a degree and that people will, find us. This one isn't the most thought out thing, to be honest. We're just like, shoot, we need an influx of cash, and hopefully people will support it.
And people can still submit their content to you, is that right? You're still looking for collaborators, or is that closed?
There's a degree, but it's very targeted now. It's like we've kind of reached the limit of where we can just take random footage.
Okay.
It really has to be specifically targeted to something that we know we want, or something that we can tell will fit. It's just that there's a time limit to how much time we can actually go through all of this footage.
Yeah, and we're in the edit at this point too. So I mean, the film is, more or less getting structured right now. So we're pretty much, we're not completely in post, I would say, but we're have more than one toe in the waters of post production.
Okay, and you're still working. You have your own jobs outside of this as well?
Well, so Aaron is actually, this is so sad in a way. So Aaron had just taken a job working on another film.
Oh.
So he is right now editing a documentary about T.I., like all day, every day.
Oh.
And then he comes home and he works on this, like late, and then all weekends. And
Wow.
it's just one of those things where he'd already made a commitment somewhere else, and there's really no getting around that. And also there's rent.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
he's really like pushing the exhaustion wall to a point that is
Yeah.
heroic.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry to
we're
hear that.
familiar with it.
Yeah, a lot of walks around the block will help with that. Just get out of the house,
Yeah,
get away from the computer.
We've actually turned toward Red Bull as our savior.
Actually, I've moved. Red Bull was just a gateway for me. I've moved on to 5-hour energies.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there's a tolerance level with that, yeah.
Well, we want to thank you both for joining us here at Film Courage
Yeah,
today.
thank you both.
And we want to thank you for your efforts in getting this film made. And we're really looking forward to following the progress and seeing the finished product when it's all said and done.
Yeah, we sure are, and curious too. Like in 20, 30 years, because what it's just sort of like the Kent State shooting and different things, and what this film will be in 20, 30 years. Sometimes you can't see stuff until it's further down the line. So, be fascinated by that. Well, we've been speaking. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say thanks for having us, and certainly we're hopeful that we can do something that adds to the conversation.
Sounds like you're definitely doing that.
Yeah, and we've
Very
enjoyed
cool.
this conversation. We've been speaking with Audrey Ewell and Aaron Aites of 99%, the Occupy Wall Street collaborative film. For more on Audrey and Aaron, please visit their Indiegogo campaign page at indiegogo.com/99film. Also, the film's site at 99, and that's the numbers 99percentfilm.com, Facebook.com/99percentfilm, and Twitter at 99_film. And if you want to see their previous work, their film Until the Light Takes Us, and you can find that at blackmetalmovie.com.
Also, check out the article by Williams Cole, one of the collaborators on 99%, and it's an article on filmcourage.com entitled Filmmaker Ego Check, Important, Essential, and Just Nuts, regarding his involvement with 99%.
Thank you once again for spending time with us today, Audrey and Aaron.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having us,
Yeah,
guys.
absolutely. And also thank you to Ronan here at LA Talk Radio. He built filmcourage.com for us, and he runs the board at the station as well, and he is an integral, essential part of what we do here, and we would be totally lost without him. Thank you, Ronan. Would you like to hear your project or business mentioned during one of our shows or displayed on our site? To advertise with filmcourage.com and our radio program, please inquire through filmcourage.com via our contact page.
Next Sunday, we have another fascinating story. You may have heard of them. We have a very fascinating story of two brothers, Franz and Kurt Wisner, and their book, Honeymoon with My Brother.
Yeah, and it was slated maybe to be a movie, and we're curious to hear more about it. It's a true life account of Franz, who unfortunately was left a week before his wedding by his bride-to-be and received a work demotion from his real estate job at the same time.
Franz decided not to cancel the wedding, instead turning it into a party, and he kept the honeymoon reservations, went on the honeymoon with his brother Kurt until both brothers realized that they wanted to sell their homes and see the world for a few years.
Both brothers tied up loose ends and settled their financial affairs, traveling the world to discover the true meaning of love.
For more about this incredible story, please visit honeymoonwithmybrother.com and Franz's latest project, howtheworldmakeslove.com.
Until next Sunday, have a great week.